In this video, I'm going to show you one method of making a welt pocket. A welt pocket is defined as a pocket whose opening is raised up from the garment's surface, hence the name welt. I feel it necessary to explain this because if you Google the term welt pocket, you're going to get all sorts of amusing results, many of which are not welt pockets. You'll find double-jetted pockets, single-jetted pockets, piped pockets, and God knows what else. Even YouTube videos carry this bad name attached to this type of pocket, and I've had a few arguments with video authors about this. It's like a nightmare game of telephone.
See, I'm starting to get the idea of the shape here. This is going to be a double welt pocket, but I'll explain how a single welt pocket.
You can call it anything you want, but think about it. What does the word welt mean? A welt is a raised surface, but a jetting should be absolutely flat after it's pressed and finished. Try it. Google single-jetted pocket, double-jetted pocket, see what you get. Sometimes I feel like giving out a couple of welts just to get the point across. I think this is important because it's showing that there's a deterioration in the trade. I thought that at first perhaps it was a terminology difference between men and women's outfits, but nope. Every single professional English tailoring manual that I've read prior to the 1960s always called other pockets by their proper names. The older the manual, the more pronounced the distinction. I even discovered a passage in a 1952 manual that makes the distinction between jettings and pipings for internal chest pockets. So let's get this story straight, people. There's pipings, jettings, and welts. Now then, let's do some science, people! Here's how to make the pocket. Lay the template down on the straight grain of the pocketing material. Trace down the widths of your pocket bag. Cut both pieces of pocketing on top of one another. Make sure the pocket is as wide as you want it to be, plus about another ½ inch on each side. Use the angled edge of the template and trace the top of the pocket. Then cut it. Mark the end with the angle. Later, it will be important to match the appropriate angles of your pockets, otherwise your pocket sides won't match. Now for this demo, I'm going to make a simulation of a coat 4-piece. Here I'm marking the arm side curve, then the underarm dart, then the front edge, then the roll line. Mark where the top of the welt will be, making sure to line up the pinstripes with the angle of the template. Give at least 1½ inches of room between the edge of the pocket and the side curve. Now using the welt template, mark the width of your pocket using the length desired, using the inside edges of the template. Using a straight edge, make sure your lines are parallel, usually about 1 inch apart. If you need to, brush off any bad lines and redraw. Now trace your welt using the outside edges of the template. Again, use the length desired. Mark the edge of the pocket, then trim it 3/8 of an inch past the line. Then trim the rest of the welt. Next, using a piece of bias cut fusible, cut the reinforcement piece to the size of the templates along the inner and bottom edges, making sure to use its opposite side. Place the reinforcement on the wrong side of the welt piece at its bottom edge. Press it for at least 8 to 10 seconds. I'm making some mark stitches on the pocket's corners of my mock-up 4-piece. These mark stitches will show on the wrong side of the cloth, so that way I can position my reinforcement. Measuring an inch larger than the pocket, cut a piece of bias cut fusible and fuse it to the wrong side of the cloth. Place the top of the welt to the angled edge of the pocketing and sew straight across the top, using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Remember to machine tack the ends and trim off the excess thread. Press open the seam. Then turn over the pocket and crease the top of the welt at the edge of the reinforcement. Next, pin the ends of the welt, thumbing them toward the center by 1/8 of an inch on either side. Afterward, you'll notice that the cloth won't lay flat. That's a good thing. The reason why we want this is because once it's sewn, the pocketing will be forced to hide behind the welt, out of sight. Stitch each side of the welt from the top to the bottom, giving 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, making sure to machine tack the corners securely. Remove the pins. Trim the pocketing on each side, stopping where the stitch is. Trim the excess pocketing on either side of the welt. Trim the top corners of the welt at a 45-degree angle, ending where the stitch begins. Press open the seams. To do this, you lay the seams open at an angle. Don't worry about creasing the welt cloth. This will be undone later. Trim the welt cloth's seam allowance to 1/8 of an inch to make it less bulky. Next, turn the welt right side out. Push the corners neat with a blunt object. The pointy, rounded end of this brush handle is a good example. Don't press too hard, because otherwise you'll push through and ruin your welt. Notice the lighter colored pocketing is being pulled behind the welt because of that thumbing in we did earlier. Just enough to be hidden from view on the outside. Press the welt nice and flat. This will undo all of the creases we made while working on the welt. If the pinstripes are showing on the edge of the welt, thumb them in just enough until they're hidden from view and then press it down again with the iron. Make a chalk line 1/4 of an inch away from the bottom of the welt. Next, take your welt and place it face down, upside down, matching the bottom of your welt line on the forepiece with the line that you just made on the welt. Match the stripes. Be very, very precise with this. Pin at that line, and then flip it up to see if it's matching. Sew the welt to the chest, again making sure that the seam is tacked off really well. Fuse some reinforcement to the back of the top pocketing piece and place it like so. Pin the pocketing to keep it still. Tuck the seam allowance of the pocket underneath the seam allowance of the welt. This will allow you to see where the stitching line is going to be very easily. Sew the top of the piece of the pocketing to the chest piece. This seam will be 1/4 of an inch shorter than the bottom seam on each end. Now cut open the pocket mouth between the parallel seams, stopping 1/4 of an inch shorter than the shorter seam. Then at the ends of the mouth, cut it out at an angle, meeting each seam tack, forming a triangle of cloth on each end. Pull the top pocketing through the mouth and press the seam open. Then do the same for the bottom seam. Pull the pocketing through, then baste the welt with a diagonal stitch to keep it in place. Press open the welt seam. Put the pocketing pieces over each other into place, then trim the pocket down to the desired length. Pin, then baste the pocketing, prepping it for sewing. Sew around the pocket from right mouth side to left mouth side, all the way around the pocket, making sure to tack securely over each triangle that you made. As you stitch away from the mouth, angle the pocket bag out a bit to give it more room on the inside to put things in the bag. This helps prevent the pocket bag from stretching the mouth open if there's something inside it. Remove the basting stitches and pins, then with pinking shears, trim around the seam, giving at least half of an inch of seam allowance. If you don't have pinking shears, you can also use a serging stitch at the same distance and then trim closely around that with your shears. With the pocket bag made, turn the piece back over and press the welt with a pressing cloth in lots of steam, giving the welt a sharp, crisp edge. And lastly, using a silk or silamide finishing thread, whip stitch the welt onto the coat through the reinforcement. One way to ensure that the top corners of the welt are securely fastened is to make a decorative bar tack on the front side of the cloth on each corner, so start your stitches from the bottom and work your way up to finish off with a tack. Here's a close-up view of the process on the other side. And there you have it, a finished pocket. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for more videos.